Hello and welcome to Take Heart. Just the other day, a bit in the Bible caught my attention. It's when Jesus is tired, and we're told that he's walking somewhere with his disciples. And then John chapter 4, verse 6 says, "Tired as he was from the journey, he sat down by the well." And as Jesus is sitting there tired, and I know many of us probably are watching this and you're pretty tired, as Jesus is sitting there tired, the Father brings somebody into his path that he wants Jesus to reach out to. He wants him to bless. And it's the Samaritan woman. She's had a very messed up life. She and Jesus end up having this conversation that starts about water and ends about worship. And at the end of it, she's realized that he's the Messiah, and she rushes off back to her village to tell the rest of them to come and meet him. Meanwhile, Jesus has been alone with her at this point. Meanwhile, while she's back in the village, his disciples come back. And it says this, "Meanwhile, his disciples urged him, 'Rabbi, eat something.'" So they see that Jesus is tired and they think the solution is food. And in this, they remind me of my dear friend, Mike. When I say to Mike, "I'm a little weary," he says, "Fear not, I will put some cleftico in the oven for you." When I say to Mike, "My car has just broken down by the side of the motorway," he says, "Don't worry, I'm on my way with some macaroni do forno." When I say to Mike, "I'm trying to train my children to sleep and they keep waking up at random times," he says, "Fear not, I have some stuffed vine leaves that I'm going to bring round to your house." Basically, whatever the problem is, for him the solution is food. The disciples, they see Jesus is tired and they say, "You need to eat something," and that makes sense. But then Jesus says to them, "I have food to eat that you know nothing about." Then his disciples said to each other, "Could someone have brought him some food? Where's he got this food from?" "My food," Jesus said, "is to do the will of him who sent me and to finish his work." And you get the sense from his interaction with them that he's tired at the start as he sits down by the well. Then he gives out to this woman. He breaks through social barriers. He impacts her life. And by the end of it, he's energized. And he says, "My food, that which strengthens me, that which gives me nourishment, is to do the will of my Father." It's to give myself into his work, to his work. And I've just been reflecting on this, and one of the things that can happen is when we're tired, how does God react? One of the things he does very plainly in the Bible is he tells us to rest. And he's the God of the Sabbath. He rests himself on the seventh day. He creates this pattern for Israel. Jesus himself regularly had naps. We see that in the Gospels. He went to parties. He had barbecues on the beach. He says to his disciples at one point, when they're exhausted, "Come away with me by yourselves to a quiet place and get some rest." So sometimes he reacts to our tiredness by wanting us to rest. It's not, I either do the will of God or I'm having a break. His will is that we recover and we rest. And that embraces all of our humanity. At the same time, on the other hand, so we hold that in one hand. In the other hand, we also hold this, that Jesus gives himself to the work of the Father, and in giving out, somehow he is replenished. And the other thing that I've tried to mull over is there is a place for continuing in our tiredness to give out, doing what we know God has called us to do, and in that we find a strengthening. What I'm not saying, just to be clear, is that if we're at a point where we're approaching spiritual, emotional, physical burnout, we just keep going. That's not what I'm saying. That's a different type of tiredness. But what I am trying to get at is what I see in the mirror sometimes is that when I'm tired, my tendency, I don't know if you can relate to this, but is to just become a lot more selfish than usual. My tendency is to turn inward on myself. It's to take my eyes off what God has called me to do and who he's called me to serve, and to very much put them on myself. And actually there's a strength found in refusing to do that. In saying, even in my tiredness, Lord, is there someone you want me to bless? Is there someone you want me to reach out to? Is there somebody I can serve? Some friends of mine, I've always admired the way that they conduct themselves with money. They're not particularly wealthy, but they're very, very generous people. And one of their principles that they have is when they have very little left, and they need God to come through and do a miracle for them, but it hasn't happened yet. They're in that space of waiting for it to happen, but they don't have much left. They actually, as a principle for them, they choose at that point to give something away. They don't have a lot to give away, but a little bit of what they got, they choose at that moment to give it away as an act of defiance almost against that part of us that wants to err towards self-protection and selfishness. They do it not out of guilt, they just do it out of devotion. They do it out of love, as a way of expressing their trust in God. And I've just been thinking about that as a model, really. Jesus, in his tiredness, doesn't take his eyes off the Father, and he doesn't hesitate in giving out to this lady. And for us, I've been trying to meditate on the question, Lord, I am weary at times at the moment, but who else can I bless? How else can I serve? And I think as we do this, we're touching on what Paul says to the Romans in Romans chapter 12, verse 1. He says, "Therefore I urge you, brothers and sisters, in view of God's mercy, not to earn it, not out of guilt, in view of it, because you see his mercy, offer your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and pleasing to God. This is your true and proper worship." In other words, continue to pour yourselves out of love for him and in order to love other people. What happened as Jesus did this is he was strengthened in the same way that food nourishes us. And just two little things on this one. How does it strengthen us as we, perhaps in our tiredness, continue to try and serve others and love and bless? It strengthens us partly because we see the fruit of it. So one of the things that energized Jesus is he saw this woman whose life was so broken get turned upside down. He saw the fruit, and there is nothing better than seeing God at work in somebody's life and knowing that we partnered with him, that we had the opportunity to join in with what he was up to. So it strengthens us in that way. And the other way it strengthens us, I think, is that there's a solidity and a wholeness that comes from knowing we live for him, wholly for him. One of my favourite TV series is The West Wing. And there's a scene in the presidency of The West Wing, Josiah Bartlett's president, and he goes through a time where he can't sleep. And he's just exhausted. And they track it back to the fact that he'd compromised on what his values really were. And he was trying to please everybody. And in the end, he resolved that he was going to be true to those convictions that he had. And although it was still hard, he found he could sleep at night because he was faithful to what he knew his purpose was. And I've found that when I get torn between living for me and everything I want to do and living for him, it's kind of, I don't feel very strong internally. But on those odd days where I've said to him, Lord, I want to be all in for you. I'm tired, but I'm still yours. I'm tired, but I still want to serve. Would you send me someone to bless? I've found that there's a solidity and a strength that's in that place. That for us, the will of our Father, the purpose that he has for us, when we set ourselves to obey it, even in weariness, what we'll find, I think, is we go to bed satisfied in a way that's even deeper than physical food. God bless, and see you soon.